Did you know that when you die, your body instantly becomes about 21 grams lighter? In 1907, Dr. Duncan MacDougall conducted a series of experiments where he placed dying patients on specially designed scales. At the exact moment of death, he recorded a sudden weight loss of 21 grams, too much to be explained by released air or bodily fluids. Many believe he may have measured the weight of the human soul leaving the body. This mysterious finding has never been fully explained by modern science. But ancient wisdom traditions have long taught that something indeed does leave our physical form at death, something essential to who we truly are. Welcome, friends, to Thresholds of Thoughts. Today we'll journey beyond the known world to explore the mysteries that exist beyond our physical lives. We'll discover the hidden truths about what really happens when we die. The Life Beyond the Body, There Is No Death by Max Heindel invites us to discover a world that most of us only see in dreams, yet is actually a fundamental part of who we are. Through his words, we'll explore both the dark and bright passages of the human soul, where death isn't an end, but a doorway to a new way of being. Heindel shows us that what we think of as the end of life is just an illusion hiding a greater truth. Our existence is eternal. Our true self can't be destroyed, and death is not an end, but a rebirth into new levels of awareness. This video is a call for deep thinking. It's a journey to the invisible world, where the laws that govern the universe are shown in amazing ways. Throughout our time together, each idea will open a door to understanding, each part building a bridge to the realization that we are not limited by our physical bodies. We are beings of light, of endless consciousness, whose journey is just beginning. So close your eyes, open your mind, and join me on this journey into the unknown, where the limits of the body fade away and the true nature of our existence is revealed. In the universe, there is no death, only transformation, only life beyond the body. May this experience enlighten you, inspire you, and lead you to a deeper understanding of the reality around you. Throughout human history, people have tried to understand what death really is. Philosophers, mystics, scientists, and religious leaders have all approached this big question from many different angles. Yet even today, with all our knowledge and technology, fear and uncertainty still surround this great threshold of existence. What really happens when we die? Where do we go? Does our consciousness continue, or does it simply end? These questions have haunted humanity since we first became aware of our own mortality. In this video, we're going to explore the very heart of this mystery. We're going to break down the misconceptions about what happens when the soul transitions from this world to whatever comes next. I'll share with you a vision based on esoteric tradition, theosophy, sacred texts, and ancient teachings from around the world. The main idea I want to share with you today is clear and simple. Death is not the end of our journey. The belief that we completely stop existing after death comes from a mind conditioned by materialism, a limited view that restricts existence to just the physical world we can see and touch. This view ignores the vastness of the cosmos and the multidimensional realities that the highest spiritual traditions have explored. Most of us in the modern world have been taught to think of reality as only what we can measure with scientific instruments or perceive with our five senses. But this is a very limited way of understanding the universe. It's like trying to understand the entire ocean by looking at just one cup of water. There's so much more to reality than what meets the eye. The materialist view says that we are nothing more than our physical bodies, that our consciousness is just the result of chemical reactions in our brains, and that when our bodies die, we cease to exist completely. But is this really the whole truth? Or is it possible that this view is missing something essential about the nature of human existence? What if our physical bodies are just temporary vehicles for something much more enduring, our souls, our consciousness, our true selves? What if death is not an ending, but a transition to another state of being? These are the questions we'll be exploring together. When we look at the world's sacred traditions, we find a remarkable consistency in how they view death. Across different cultures and time periods, there's a common thread. Death is seen not as an absolute end, but as a passage to another form of existence. In biblical, Gnostic, and Hermetic texts, death is often addressed with symbolic language. These traditions hide fundamental truths about immortality behind symbols and metaphors that require careful interpretation to understand. For example, in the Bible, in Ecclesiastes 12:7, we read these words, "Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it." This simple verse gives us an essential key to understanding death. The physical body, being made of matter, returns to the earthly cycle of creation and destruction. But the spirit, our true essence, returns to its divine source. The body is temporary, but the spirit is eternal. This ancient understanding aligns perfectly with the theosophical concept of the seven-part nature of humans. According to theosophy, we are not just physical beings. We have 7 different aspects or bodies, the physical body being just the most dense and visible of these. When we die, the lower, more material components dissolve after death, allowing the immortal essence, the higher aspects of our being, to continue evolving in higher planes of existence. We find similar ideas in Gnostic texts. In the Gospel of Philip, an ancient Gnostic text, it states, "Those who say they will die first and then rise are mistaken. If they do not receive resurrection while they are alive, when they die, they will receive nothing." This passage points to a profound esoteric truth. Death does not automatically grant enlightenment or transformation. Our consciousness must prepare in life for what awaits beyond physical existence. In other words, how we live determines how we will experience what comes after death. The way we develop our consciousness during life affects how we'll experience the afterlife. Similarly, in the Corpus Hermeticum, an ancient collection of Egyptian Greek wisdom texts, we find this crucial teaching about death and transcendence. "O my son, matter is the tomb of the spirit, and when the spirit is freed from it, it returns to the light." This beautiful metaphor sees the physical body not as our true home, but as a kind of tomb or temporary dwelling place for our spirit. Death liberates the spirit from this material prison, allowing it to return to the light, to a more natural state of being. Mystics throughout the ages, from many different traditions, have insisted on this same basic truth. Death is not the end of existence. It's the return to a greater reality, where the soul faces the weight of its actions, its desires, and its level of evolution. Far from being the end of our story, death is simply the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. These ideas might seem strange or unfamiliar if you've grown up in a modern Western society dominated by materialistic thinking, but they represent the accumulated wisdom of thousands of years of human spiritual inquiry. And as we'll see, they offer a much more hopeful and comprehensive view of death than the materialistic perspective that sees death as simply the end of existence. So what exactly happens when we die? According to the esoteric teachings passed down through various spiritual traditions, the process of death is far more complex and meaningful than simply ceasing to exist. When the moment arrives that marks the end of physical life, the usefulness of our dense physical body is over. At this point, what esoteric traditions call the ego, our true self or consciousness, withdraws from the body through the head, taking with it the mind and the desire body, just as it does every night during sleep. However, what makes death different from sleep is that now the vital body, sometimes called the etheric body, is also withdrawn. This vital body is composed of a subtle substance called ether, which overlaps and interpenetrates our physical bodies during life. It's the template or blueprint for the physical body and the vehicle through which life force flows. Once the silver cord that links the higher and lower vehicles of consciousness is broken, it can never be repaired. This is the true point of no return, the moment of irreversible physical death. The silver cord is mentioned in various spiritual texts, including the Bible in Ecclesiastes 12:6, which speaks of death as the time when the silver cord is loosed. The vital body is composed of a subtle form of physical matter called ether, which actually has weight. While modern science cannot yet weigh this substance, because scientists cannot collect enough of it to place on a scale, there is evidence for its existence. When it leaves the dense body at the moment of death, a decrease in weight occurs in all cases, demonstrating that something with weight, though invisible, departs from the dense body at that moment. This might be what Dr. MacDougall detected in his famous experiment with the 21 grams, the weight of the vital body, leaving the physical form. After death, something remarkable happens. The person experiences a panoramic review of their entire life. The vital body, which is the storehouse of all memories of the past life, allows for this experience. When the ego withdraws from the dense physical body, the entire life as recorded in the vital body's subconscious memory remains open to the mind's eye. In this life review, events unfold in reverse order from death back to birth. The person doesn't initially feel any emotion about these events. They're simply a spectator. The purpose of this review is to create an imprint in the desire body, the vehicle of feelings and emotions, which will later form the basis for the experiences in what some traditions call purgatory and the first heaven, the initial states of the afterlife journey. It's important to understand that during the first 3.5 days after death, this life review is taking place, and the silver cord is still connected, though the person is no longer in their physical body. During this time, the deceased should not be disturbed by excessive grief, loud lamentations, or other disturbances, as these can interrupt the important process of life review. After the life review is complete and the silver cord is fully severed, the deceased begins a process of purification and assimilation. First, they experience what some traditions call purgatory, not as punishment, but as a natural process where the lower desires and negative actions of the past life are purged. Then they move to the first heaven, where the good deeds and positive experiences of the life are assimilated as spiritual growth. The intensity of these experiences depends on how deeply the life review was imprinted in the desire body. If the person had a peaceful death and was not disturbed during the crucial 3.5 days after death, the imprint will be deeper, and the subsequent experiences in purgatory and heaven will be more vivid and educational for the soul. After these experiences, the soul eventually moves to higher spiritual realms before eventually reincarnating for new experiences on earth. This cycle continues until the soul has learned all the lessons that physical existence has to offer and achieved a state of perfection or enlightenment. One of the most important topics addressed in Max Heindel's teachings is the hidden reality of suicide. This is a subject that requires deep sensitivity and understanding, as it touches on profound aspects of human suffering and spiritual consequences. In all major spiritual traditions, suicide has been considered a premature interruption of the karmic process, with consequences that extend beyond a single lifetime. From the theosophical perspective, suicide is not simply an escape from suffering, but a violent break with the natural flows of the soul's evolution. To understand why, we need to look at what happens energetically and spiritually when someone takes their own life. According to esoteric teachings, when the ego, our true self, descends for rebirth, it does so through what some traditions call the second heaven. There, it is assisted by spiritual beings in constructing an archetype for its coming body, and it infuses into that archetype a life force meant to last a predetermined number of years. These archetypes are described as hollow spaces that possess a vibrating, seeing movement that attracts physical matter toward them. This process causes all the atoms of the body to vibrate in harmony with a small atom within the heart called the seed atom, which, like tuning fork, sets the tone for the rest of the body's matter. At the moment when life has been fully lived on Earth, when a person has lived out their natural lifespan, the vibrations in the archetype cease, the seed atom withdraws, the dense body decays, and the desire body, where the ego functions in purgatory and the first heaven, takes the shape of the physical body. However, when someone commits suicide, this natural process is violently interrupted. The archetype still holds residual life force that was meant to sustain the individual for a longer time. As a result, the ego remains tethered to the astral plane in a state of disharmony, experiencing the unspent emotions and sufferings that drove it to take its own life. The person who takes their own life doesn't escape their torment. Instead, they find themselves with a fragmented consciousness, lacking a physical vehicle through which to process their emotional state. Without the ability to actively work through their suffering in the physical world, they remain suspended in their anguish. Helena Blavatsky, the founder of modern theosophy, warns in her work, The Secret Doctrine, that suicides remain trapped in an intermediate state, a plane of existence where uncontrolled psychic energies create prolonged suffering. This concept has some similarity to the Christian idea of purgatory, though with a more precise metaphysical meaning. The soul is not being punished by any external force, but is inevitably experiencing the consequences of its action in a state of disturbance until its natural life cycle would have been completed. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, one of the most detailed works on states after death, also mentions the situation of those who die violently, describing how their consciousness remains trapped in the bardo, the intermediate state between death and rebirth, unable to move forward in their spiritual journey. According to Heindel, the individual who commits suicide feels as if they are hollow inside and experiences a sensation of gnawing, which can be compared to the pangs of intense hunger. The material for the construction of a dense body surrounds them, but since they lack the seed atom, it's impossible for them to assimilate that material and build it into a body. This terrifying feeling of emptiness lasts as long as their ordinary span of life should have lasted. It's important to understand that these teachings are not meant to condemn or judge those who have taken their own lives out of deep suffering. Rather, they are meant to help us understand the profound spiritual reality that life cannot be interrupted without consequences for the continuity of consciousness. This knowledge is crucial because it helps us see that suicide doesn't end suffering. It transforms and often intensifies it in the non-physical realms, where the soul is left in a fragmented state, unable to process emotions without the medium of the physical body. The esoteric teachings tell us that in the next incarnation, when difficulties arise in the individual's path, they will recall the sufferings that resulted from suicide in their previous life and will find the inner strength to go through the experience that fosters the growth of their soul rather than trying to escape it. It's curious to note that committing suicide in one life and the consequent suffering during the time the archetype still exists often generates in such individuals a morbid fear of death in the next life. So when death truly occurs in the course of ordinary life in a subsequent incarnation, they seem frantic after leaving the body, eager to return to the physical world again. This is why spiritual traditions throughout history have regarded suicide as a disruption of karmic evolution with significant repercussions beyond a single lifetime. Understanding these metaphysical consequences of death, both natural and self-imposed, is essential to grasp the greater reality of existence. Only by embracing life's lessons, no matter how painful, can the soul progress toward higher states of being. This is not a teaching of punishment, but of the natural laws of spiritual evolution and the continuity of consciousness. Another profound mystery explored in Max Heindel's teachings is the fate of children who die in infancy. What happens to those tiny souls who depart from this world without having had the opportunity to fully experience earthly existence? From a purely materialistic perspective, the death of an infant seems incomprehensible and meaningless. How can a soul depart from the physical plane without even having had the chance to complete its life cycle or experience the fullness of earthly existence? Such a loss often raises profound questions and feelings of sorrow and injustice for those left behind. Yet when viewed through the lens of spiritual traditions such as Theosophy and Gnosticism, the situation takes on a completely different light. These teachings suggest that not all souls incarnate with the intention of living a long life. Some souls come into the physical world for only a brief period, with specific purposes that don't require the typical duration of a full lifetime. To understand this better, we need to look at how the spiritual vehicles of a human being develop over time. According to Heindel's teachings, when a child is born, it's not just the physical body that's developing. The spiritual vehicles, the vital body, the desire body, and the mind are also in a state of gestation and are born at later stages of development. This happens because these higher vehicles have not had as long an evolution behind them as the dense physical body. Therefore, they take more time to reach a state of maturity sufficient for individualization. The vital body is born around the 7th year of life, when the period of excessive growth marks its arrival. This corresponds to the time when children lose their baby teeth and begin to develop more independence. The desire body is born at the time of puberty, around the age of 14, bringing with it the emotional turbulence and passions characteristic of adolescence. Finally, the mind is fully born at age 21, when the young person is said to have become an adult. What has not been vivified cannot die. Therefore, when a child dies before the birth of the desire body, it passes into the invisible world in a different state than an adult. It cannot ascend to the second and third heavens because the mind and the desire body have not been born and will not die. So it simply waits in the first heaven until it is given a new opportunity for incarnation. From an esoteric perspective, children who die in infancy don't go through the same process after death as adults. Since they haven't developed complex karma in their present incarnation, their higher principles don't require a long period of purification. In Theosophy, it's believed that these beings can reincarnate quickly or remain in an elevated state of existence, waiting for a new opportunity to learn on earth. In the apocryphal Gospels, we find the idea that children are not tainted by the density of the material world, making their transition more fluid and allowing them to remain in higher planes until their evolution requires it. The Kabbalah suggests that some of these children are advanced souls who don't need to live a complete existence, but have incarnated for brief periods to resolve unfinished matters or to spiritually assist those around them. These teachings suggest that the death of a child is not a random or senseless event, but is part of a much larger divine plan, a meaningful part of the soul's journey and evolution. Theosophy and Gnosticism emphasize that there's no such thing as a wasted life. The soul is eternal, and it has many different lifetimes across countless incarnations. The purpose of these lifetimes is not to accumulate years, but to evolve spiritually and complete necessary lessons. Some souls, upon entering the physical world, may only need a brief experience to fulfill their purpose. These souls might return to higher planes of existence after a short period, having completed their task. Others, perhaps, are born into difficult circumstances to serve as spiritual catalysts for the families and communities they touch, helping those around them grow the divine plan, a meaningful part of the soul's journey and evolution. Theosophy and Gnosticism emphasize that there's no such thing as a wasted life. The soul is eternal, and it has many different lifetimes across countless incarnations. The purpose of these lifetimes is not to accumulate years, but to evolve spiritually and complete necessary lessons. Some souls, upon entering the physical world, may only need a brief experience to fulfill their purpose. These souls might return to higher planes of existence after a short period, having completed their task. Others, perhaps, are born into difficult circumstances to serve as spiritual catalysts for the families and communities they touch, helping those around them grow spiritually even though they themselves may not live long enough to experience the full range of earthly existence. The loss of such a child can have a profound impact on the people left behind, pushing them toward a deeper understanding of life, death, and the soul's purpose. Often, the brief life of a child serves as a spiritual trigger, awakening the family to higher spiritual truths and leading them toward greater personal and collective transformation. In light of these teachings, it becomes clear that the duration of a life doesn't determine its meaning or purpose. A brief existence can be as meaningful and, in some cases, even more spiritually significant than a long one. The soul's evolution is not linear, but rather cyclical and multidimensional. Each lifetime is a piece of a larger puzzle, a step toward greater understanding and enlightenment. The death of a child, then, is not a loss in the traditional sense, but a necessary part of the ongoing evolution of the soul. It reminds us that life is not confined to this earthly existence, but is part of an eternal journey, with death being just one transition in the ongoing process of spiritual growth. When someone we love dies, our relationship with them doesn't end. According to spiritual traditions, our duties toward our loved ones who have passed from earthly life don't end when they have severed their physical ties. We have a responsibility to them beyond the grave. Our attitude after the death of our loved ones continues to affect them. The departed often remain near their homes for several months after leaving the body, and they can feel the conditions there even more intensely than when they were in earthly life. If we sigh, lament, and groan for them, we transfer our melancholy to them, or we tie ourselves to the home in an effort to cheer ourselves. In either case, we become an obstacle and a stumbling block on their spiritual path. The transition to the other world is quite serious in itself, as it involves a process of adaptation to strange conditions. The spirit that passes is even more hindered by the pain and anguish of the loved ones still surrounding it. When the deceased find themselves surrounded by a cloud of blackness, with loved ones dressed in mourning clothes and feeding their grief for months or years, the effect cannot be other than depressing. Instead, what helps the departed most is a cheerful, helpful, hopeful, and encouraging attitude. Selfish grief for the lost should be suppressed so that the departing spirit receives all possible encouragement. In some spiritual traditions, such as the Rosicrucian path that Max Heindel taught, the surviving family members dress in white at the funeral, and a cheerful and bright spirit prevails. The survivors' thoughts are not, "What will I do now that I've lost everything? The world feels empty." Instead, they think, "I hope they settle well in their new conditions as soon as possible, and do not grieve thinking that they have left us behind." We fervently pray for their well-being and that they learn the lessons of this life in their experiences in purgatory and in the first heaven. Thus, thanks to the goodwill, intelligence, selflessness, and love of the remaining friends, the passing spirit can enter into new conditions in much more favorable circumstances. Another important aspect of helping the departed has to do with how we treat the body after death. In the Hermetic tradition, the treatment of a body after death is not a meaningless ritual, but a sacred act that influences the soul's transition. The way a deceased person is treated reflects the level of understanding that their community has about death. In ancient Egypt, mummification wasn't merely a method of preservation, but an alchemical process meant to guide the soul in its transition. The Egyptian Book of the Dead explains that funeral rites are keys that activate the soul's remembrance on its journey after death. This knowledge has largely been lost in modern society. Burial, when performed without spiritual awareness, can become an obstacle for the deceased, tying them to the earthly plane. There are also specific considerations about the timing of cremation. According to Heindel's teachings, when cremation occurs, the vital body disintegrates immediately. Since the vital body is the storehouse of the images of the past life that are being recorded in the desire body to form the foundation of the afterlife experience, cremation should not be done before 3.5 days have passed after death, unless help is given to the spirit by those who are knowledgeable in these matters. The vital body is the vehicle for the perception of the senses. As it remains with the feeling body, the desire body, and the etheric cord which connects it to the discarded dense body, until the etheric cord is cut, there must be a certain amount of feeling experienced by the ego when its dense body is disturbed. This causes pain when blood is extracted, when embalming fluid is injected, when the body is opened for post-mortem examination, or when the body is cremated. Therefore, great care must be taken not to cause discomfort to the departing spirit. Silence and prayer are of immense benefit at this moment. If we wisely love the departing spirit, we can earn its lasting gratitude by following these instructions. We must also say a few words about the treatment of the dying, who in many cases suffer indescribable agony due to the misguided kindness of friends. The administration of stimulants to the dying causes more suffering than any other form of treatment. It is not difficult for the ego to leave the body, but stimulants have the effect of throwing the departing ego back into its body with the force of a catapult, forcing it to experience once more the sufferings it was attempting to escape. Souls that have departed have often complained to researchers that they had never suffered so much in their life as when they were prevented from dying for many hours. The only rational course is to allow nature to take its course when the end is inevitable. Another more far-reaching sin against the passing spirit is giving way to a strong cry or lamentation in the death chamber or near it. Right after its release, and from hours to several days after death, the ego is busy with a matter of the utmost importance. Much of the value of the past life depends on the attention given to this process. If distracted by the sobs and laments of loved ones, it will lose much. But if strengthened by prayer and helped by silence, much future pain can be avoided for all concerned. We are never more guardians of our brother than when they pass through this Gethsemane, and it is one of our greatest opportunities to serve them and accumulate heavenly treasures for ourselves. We have studied the phenomenon of birth and developed a science of birth. We have qualified midwives and nurses trained to attend to the mother and child in the best possible way to ensure their comfort. But sadly, we lack a science of death. When a child enters the world, we labor in an intelligent effort. When a lifelong friend is about to leave us, we are often helpless, not knowing how to help, and worse, we make mistakes and cause suffering instead of helping. As interest and belief in life after death become more widespread, The need for a scientific method to care for those passing to the higher life will be impressed upon the people. Then we will have nurses, doctors, and ministers who are versed in the science of death as well as in the science of birth. The spirit will then be surrounded by love and peace at the time of death, and will have a deeper and clearer record with which to begin its life work in its new state. In all the uncertainties that fill our world, there is only one certainty: death. In one way or another, after a short or long life, this ending of the material phase of our existence arrives, which is actually a birth into a new world. What we call birth is, as the poet Wordsworth beautifully said, a forgetting of the past. Birth and death can both be seen as the transition of human activity from one world to another. It depends on our perspective whether we call this change birth or death. If someone enters the world we live in, we call it birth. If they leave our plane of existence to enter another world, we call it death. However, for the individual in question, the passage from one world to another is nothing more than moving to another city. The person continues to live without changing. Only their external environment and condition change. The transition from one world to another is often accompanied by a period of unconsciousness, much like sleep. This is why our consciousness may remain focused on the world we have left behind. In childhood, heaven seems to surround us. In fact, many spiritual traditions teach that all children are naturally clairvoyant for a time after birth, able to perceive spiritual realities that adults have forgotten. Similarly, those who have just died continue to perceive the material world for a while after death. If we depart this life in the full vigor of physical manhood or womanhood, with strong ties to family, friends, or other interests, the dense physical world will continue to attract our attention for much longer than if death occurs in old age, when earthly ties have been loosened before the transition we call death. This principle is similar to how the seed clings to the flesh of unripe fruit while it easily and cleanly detaches from the ripe fruit. That is why it is easier to die at an advanced age than in youth. The elderly have often already begun the process of detachment from the physical world, making their transition smoother. The unconsciousness that usually accompanies the transition of an incoming spirit at birth and a departing spirit at death is due to our inability to adjust our focus instantaneously. It is similar to the difficulty we experience when moving from a dark room into bright sunlight, or vice versa. Under such conditions, it takes time before we can distinguish the objects around us. The same happens with the newborn and the newly deceased. Both must readjust their perspective to their new condition. When the moment arrives that marks the end of physical life, the usefulness of the dense body is over, and the ego withdraws from it through the head, taking with it the mind and the desire body, just as it does every night during sleep. However, now the vital body is also useless, so it is withdrawn as well. Once the silver cord that links the higher and lower vehicles is broken, it can never be repaired. This is the point of no return, the moment of irreversible physical death. We must remember that the vital body is composed of ether, which overlaps the dense bodies of plants, animals, and humans during life. Ether is physical matter and therefore has weight. The only reason scientists cannot weigh it is that they cannot collect enough of it to place on a scale. However, when it leaves the dense body at the moment of death, a decrease in weight occurs in all cases, showing that something with weight, though invisible, departs from the dense body at that moment. This measured weight loss might be what Dr. MacDougall detected in his famous experiment. Physical science acknowledges that whatever power moves, the heart does not come from outside, but from within. Occult scientists perceive a chamber in the left ventricle near the apex where a small atom floats in a sea of the highest ether. The force within that atom, like the forces in all other atoms, is the undifferentiated life of God. Without this force, minerals could not form matter into crystals, and the plant, animal, and human kingdoms could not shape their bodies. The deeper we delve, the clearer it becomes that it is fundamentally true that in God we live, move, and have our being. This atom is called the seed atom. The force it contains moves the heart and sustains life in the organism. All the atoms of the body must vibrate in harmony with this atom. The forces within the seed atom have been inherent in every dense body possessed by the particular ego to which it is attached. On its plastic tablet, all the experiences of that ego throughout its many lives are inscribed. when we return to God, when we become one with Him once more, this record, which is uniquely God's record, will remain, and thus we will preserve our individuality. We will transmute our experiences into faculties, evil into good, and retain the good as power for higher achievements. The silver cord that links the higher and lower vehicles terminates in the seed atom within the heart. When material life naturally ends, the forces within the atom are released, passing outward along the pneumogastric nerve, through the back of the head, and along the silver cord, taking with them the higher vehicles. This rupture in the heart is what marks physical death, but the silver cord connecting the vehicles does not immediately break in some cases, not for several days. At the end of this exploration, we find ourselves at the threshold of an understanding that goes beyond the ordinary. For centuries, humanity has considered death an unfathomable abyss, an impenetrable mystery that separates life from the unknown. However, the highest spiritual teachings from theosophy to Gnostic and esoteric texts have proclaimed an unchanging truth. Death is not the end. Throughout this video, we've broken down the illusion of complete annihilation and revealed the continuity of the soul. We've explored what happens to beings after the transition, the implications of suicide, the meaning of infant death, and the importance of rituals and conscious support for those who have departed. But beyond theoretical knowledge remains an essential question. What do we do with this wisdom? For knowing that death does not exist is not enough. Understanding its true nature means living differently. If anything has become clear in this study, it's that death is only a transition between states of existence. Consciousness does not dissolve into nothingness. On the contrary, it expands beyond the limitations of the physical body. Spiritual traditions have described this passage with different names. In Kabbalah, it speaks of passing through the veils. In Gnosticism, of awakening to spiritual reality. In Tibet, of crossing the bardo. In Hermeticism, of the return of the spirit to the light. In the Bible, Christ says in John 11:25, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, shall live." This is not a simple religious statement, but an esoteric key. The resurrection does not occur after death, but during life itself. The true death is ignorance, and the true resurrection is the awakening of consciousness. Therefore, preparation for the transition does not begin on the deathbed, but in every thought, in every action, and in every decision made in life. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, with its profound Gnostic teachings, offers us an essential insight into the nature of our existence. There is no sin, but you are the ones who make sin exist when you act according to the habits of your adulterated nature. This statement is deeply significant as it calls attention to the unconscious patterns of behavior that often dictate our actions. It reminds us that much of what we consider to be sin, guilt, or wrongdoing is not inherently real, but rather a construct of our own mind's habits ingrained in us by societal conditioning, personal fears, and misconceptions. We create the illusion of sin by acting from a place of unconsciousness, from a state of disconnectedness from our higher selves, from the divine nature that lies at the core of our being. When we live from this unconscious state, we are acting according to the adulterated nature of the ego, the part of us that is out of alignment with our true essence. This Gnostic teaching is crucial to understanding the essence of spiritual awakening. The greatest mistake of humanity is not death as we have been taught, but the unconsciousness with which we live. It is not the fear of death that binds us, but the ignorance of life itself. When we live without awareness of the deeper spiritual truths that govern our existence, we remain trapped in a cycle of suffering, confusion, and false beliefs. The true teaching of this video is not merely about death, it is about life. It is about living consciously, with awareness of the profound truths that underlie our existence. It is about living a purposeful life, a life that recognizes the divine spark within us and understands that each moment is an opportunity for the soul to grow and evolve. The true essence of conscious living is recognizing that every action, every decision is a step in the evolution of the soul. Every choice we make shapes not only our present experience, but also our future, our spiritual trajectory. When we live with this awareness, life becomes more than a series of random events. It becomes a sacred pilgrimage, a journey towards greater wisdom, compassion, and understanding. It is no longer about accumulating wealth, status, or material possessions, but about aligning ourselves with the deeper forces of love, truth, and spiritual development. Every moment we live with awareness brings us closer to our true nature and to the realization that we are eternal beings, not bound by time, space, or the limitations of the physical world. As we conclude this video, we are reminded that the soul's journey does not end here. These words and teachings may conclude, but the evolution of the soul continues ever onward and upward. The truths presented in this video are not mere theories or abstract concepts. They are keys to unlocking a deeper understanding of existence. These teachings are not meant to remain as intellectual knowledge. They are meant to transform us, to reshape the way we perceive ourselves, our lives, and the world around us. He who understands death will live without fear. He who understands the immortality of the soul will transcend the illusion of time. With this understanding, death no longer has dominion over us. It becomes just another step in the eternal dance of existence, a necessary part of our soul's unfolding journey. The ultimate lesson is that life is not about avoiding death, but about living consciously, in full recognition of our eternal nature. It is about embracing each moment with awareness, knowing that every action we take, every thought we think, is part of the greater tapestry of our soul's evolution. This shift in perspective from fear to awareness, from unconscious living to conscious creation, is what allows us to transcend the limitations of the material world and align ourselves with the divine. We are not mere physical beings. We are souls on a journey, eternal and ever-growing. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of the mysteries of the soul, consciousness, and eternity. Our journey of understanding and awakening is far from over. Together, we will continue to uncover more layers of truth, deepening our awareness and expanding our consciousness. The path ahead is illuminated with wisdom, and every step we take brings us closer to understanding the true nature of our existence, transcending the illusions of fear and time, and embracing the infinite possibilities of the soul's journey. If you found value in this video, please support the Thresholds of Thoughts channel by subscribing and liking this video. Your engagement helps us continue creating more profound content that explores the deeper mysteries of existence. Remember, in the universe, there is no death, only transformation, only life beyond the body. Until next time, may your journey be filled with light, understanding, and the growing awareness of who you truly are.